And the cleric continued on. A cleric is a person who is a divine conduit of their god's power being manifested in the material world. Some are scholars, some are healers, some destroyers, and some are warriors, but all are in the service of a god. This is the story of one cleric whose god has sent them on a journey with three simple objectives. Learn all of the divine magic each world has to offer, help as many people as you can along the way, and protect each world using the gifts that have been granted to you. The cleric's journey would be long and filled with hardship, failure, and loss. But he was not afraid, for he had the love of his goddess guiding him. After years of travel, the cleric found himself on the edge of the lands of Boletaria, which had been involved in a brutal conflict between the demons and mortals, and the demons were winning. He could not explain why, but he was compelled forward into this realm, and here is where his journey into the lands of Boletaria began. At first, things seemed to be what you would expect from a land at war. Broken streets, overgrown plants, and an eerie quiet that settled in and stayed with you. He was attacked almost right away by what he thought were soldiers and knights, but he had his mace, the preferred weapon of his goddess, his shield, his armor, and his divine magic. He was ready for what this world could throw at him. After fighting his way through the land's entrance, he came across a strange fog and entered to see what was waiting for him next. A hulking monster stood before him, brandishing a large axe, and began approaching. The cleric was quick, though, and ran behind the fiend and struck with his mace. But the strike was less than effective. This would be a rough battle. One too many attempts to evade the demon ended in a clean hit on the cleric, and he fell. Death came with a pounce, and as his life drained out of him, the cleric thought he tried his best, but he had failed. Except he was not done. The goddess and Boletaria had greater plans for the cleric, and death was unacceptable. The cleric would rise and continue on until he succeeded. He would need to learn, grow, and become stronger than he was if he were to succeed in his journey. Failure is not a flaw, it is a blessing from the goddess. Each time he would fall, he would learn and become that much more of a threat to the demons plaguing this world. He would continue on. He arrived at the gates of Boletaria and took in the challenges that awaited him. Daunting walls, fortifications, guards, and even a dragon watched as he entered this land. The only way was forward, so he began his task. On his way, he would find items that may prove important to others, or equipment he could use in his journey. He would make a note of these as he went. Soon he discovered a knight in need of assistance, stuck on a ledge, with desiccated humans waiting to attack the moment he dropped down. The cleric lent a hand to this warrior, and wished him well on his journey. Soon he arrived at the lever which operated the portcullis that was blocking his path. He opened the gates and began his descent down to the ground level so he could move on. Before reaching the new opening he created, he made a curious discovery. Certain enemies in this world dropped materials he could use to improve his weapon and shield. As he was patient, he would continue to harvest these enemies until he could upgrade his equipment as much as possible. With his mace and shield upgraded, he was ready to take on what lay ahead. Upon entering the fog, he saw a large gelatinous creature surrounded by smaller creatures with hardened shields forming a wall, preventing his mace from striking the mass behind them. He had found several firebombs as he was making his way here, and decided to give them a try. The creature seemed to be highly damaged by the flames, so the cleric coated his mace in fire and took the fight directly to the beast. In no time, the demon fell to the cleric, surrendering its soul to him. The cleric's next stop would be the Nexus, where he could start learning this world's divine magic, and to present the jade hair ornament to Thomas as he remembered his story about his daughter being lost in the fighting. Hopefully, this would bring Thomas some closure and peace. The cleric decided to see what was going on in the Stone-Fang tunnels next, and was met immediately with hostilities as creatures began throwing boulders at him from on high. Very well, he thought. This was never promised to be a friendly place. After much fighting and struggling, the cleric met another blacksmith working away at his forge. Another ally gained for the cleric, and he would bring back any materials this artisan may need for his crafting. The cleric continued on. Another foggy barrier was encountered, and behind this one was a giant flame-spewing spider that seemed to be covered in plate armor. After studying the demon's attacks, the cleric realized that the fiend would be no match for his shield arm and mace. This analysis proved correct, as the spider took one too many crushing blows and fell. Another demon slain, another win for the goddess. After moving further into the mines, another monster dropped a peculiar stone that radiated heat. This would take some time, but the cleric knew his mace being infused with the power of fire would give him a large boost in his ability to deal with the threats of this world. With his mace upgraded and with the power of fire, he entered the Tower of Latria's jail cells. He fought eldritch horrors along the way and found 2 people needing assistance to be freed from their cells. As he did not have the keys to do this yet, he promised he would be back for them and asked that they hold on. A large instrument of war blocked his way forward, but this was not anything he was worried about. There was always a way to shut these things down, and he would just have to take a path that would go around this behemoth of a weapon. With the engine disabled, he climbed to the rafters and found a man who clearly would stand against him. He did not want to hurt this person, but his goddess told him he was an obstacle to be eliminated. The cleric did as he was instructed. As he made his way down to the main floor to enter the chapel, he was attacked from the shadows from behind. The attacker made a mistake, though, and turned their fight into a fair one. The cleric waited for his opening and struck the would-be assassin down. He entered the chapel and was greeted with a display of idolatry that he did not care for. This false god could try to stop him from moving forward, but she was no match for the cleric in the end. What kind of place of worship is this, he thought. As he stood wondering about what to do next, light began to shine down on him. This was good. He was pleasing the goddess with his efforts and helping to improve this world. His journey was far from over, though, and his toughest challenges were still ahead. The cleric decided to see what he could do for the Shrine of Storms next, and entered the land optimistic he could help. His heart sank immediately, as he realized this place was filled with the undead, the reanimated bodies of those poor fallen warriors who were doomed to never find peace. The cleric would grant them their peace, and let them finally rest. The cleric came across another person stuck in a jail cell left to die by the monsters of this world. He would not allow such cruelty while he was able to help and freed yet another prisoner. Upon exiting the underground tunnel, the cleric met a familiar face. The demon who had killed him when he first arrived now stood before him. As he had been learning much in his time in Boletaria, he would not fail a second time when battling the beast. A short time later, the large monster was bested. The cleric continued on. A new type of undead stood in his way now. This one was much stronger than those that had met the cleric's mace previously, but in the end, he was just another fallen warrior granted peace. The powerful undead was guarding a very special item, though, a shield that healed the cleric upon his holding it. As the cleric was primarily a healer in his former life, he could not help but feel this item was placed here by the goddess to aid him in his quest. The cleric valued life and health highly, and this was a potent piece of equipment in his hands. Not much further into his journey, the cleric found a special ring with the same healing magic infused into it. Surely, this was a sign his goddess was pleased, and that he would help to heal this broken land. The cleric's next challenge was not so much a threat as it was sad for him to see. A large monster stood before him already wounded, but too much a prisoner of his own vices to notice. A few well-placed blows with his mace, and the cleric was able to strike at the true monster controlling this bloated puppet. The demon fell quickly afterwards, and the cleric decided to move to the final land in this world. The Valley of Defilement was a nightmare for the cleric. Broken structures, broken dwellers, poison everywhere, and what seemed like an eternal toxic rain. This was not where he belonged, yet there was a presence here the cleric felt immediately. Something was very wrong with this place, yet he felt a holy aura radiating from deep within this noxious land. He must press on and unravel what this feeling was. Soon there was evidence of the divine here as he uncovered a blessed mace that worked well with his healing shield, ring, and magic. The goddess clearly wanted him to continue deeper into the valley. The battles raged on as the cleric fought his way through the entrance into the valley and into the swamp until he eventually ran into another foggy passage. Passing through, the cleric saw a glimpse into the rot and corruption of this valley as a towering beast made of leeches emerged from the toxic sludge of the swamp. The cleric felt his life being drained by the leeches and the environment, but his divine healing items kept him steady as he battered the demon with his flaming mace. Another demon slain, and the defiled valley was a step closer to being cleansed. The next task that was in front of the cleric was to free another prisoner from the demons and to make sure they made it safely back to the Nexus. A quick trip into the Tower of Latria later, and another soul was saved. After some deliberation, the cleric decided to return to the gates of Boletaria to see what the next section of this land had in store for him. A suspicious smoking bridge was his next obstacle, and, with a little patience, the red dragon played his hand. Below the bridge was the knight the cleric aided previously, seeking further help. The cleric was happy to provide it, and, again, wished him well on his journey. After several more attempts by the dragon to roast the cleric to cinders, he encountered another fog-filled passage. Knowing what to expect now, the cleric braced himself for what would come next. A knight. A large knight. And the knight had snipers. This fight would not be about strength, but strategy. The snipers were the first problem to deal with, and they were handled easily enough. The cleric then set his sights on the large, plate-clad demon in front of him. The cleric knew that for larger opponents, all one had to do was bring them down to your level, and bring the demon down he did. Once the knight was no longer able to stand, the cleric delivered the final blows to its head and claimed another victory. But then, a wall. The cleric was not allowed to move forward toward the heart of the problem until an archdemon was felled. Very well, thought the cleric, then I shall destroy an archdemon. He couldn't explain it, but he felt compelled to head back into the Valley of Defilement and journey forward until he found the source of the presence he felt when he first entered. He would need to wade through muck that poisoned him as he went, but his divine magic and goddess would not be beaten by rot and corruption. The cleric continued on. The demons attempted to stop him by throwing a giant, filthy creature at the cleric, but he would not be deterred. The Colossus was tough, but it could not handle the combination of the cleric's burning and divine weapons. Another demon defeated, and the presence grew even stronger. He was ready to confront this entity, or so he thought. What was this? This wasn't a demon or a monster. This was a priestess and a paladin. What were they doing down here, and how was this environment not destroying them? It dawned on the cleric that these two were no longer the priestess and paladin they were pretending to be, but rather, they had become corrupted by the dark influences of this land. The cleric, with a heavy heart, knew what he must do. He would release these two from their suffering and pray the gods forgave them for what they had become. The fallen paladin went down first, a mere shadow of his former self. And then the priestess chose to take her own life rather than confront the cleric. The paladin left behind his holy armor and shield, which the cleric could not leave sitting in this corrupted place. He would honor the paladin by wearing his armor and carrying his shield into battle to destroy the remaining demons of this world. The cleric returned to the mines and tunnels next to see what other monsters were waiting for him. After fighting his way through enemies and the environment, the cleric arrived at the next demon's lair. Flames sprayed everywhere as the beast emerged from the wall and let out a battle cry challenging the cleric. But he had his holy weapons and armor, his divine magic, and the blessing of the goddess. The demon was formidable, but in the end, it could not outdamage the cleric's healing magic and holy mace. Right away, the cleric entered the next room and confronted the dragon god who was waiting for his arrival. The cleric took in his surroundings and decided this was no god worth acknowledging. After some maneuvering, he made his way to two large harpoons and fired upon the god, bringing it down to the ground. The cleric brandished his holy mace and smashed it into the chin of this so-called god, destroying it in the process. 2 archdemons down, 3 to go. The cleric returned to the Shrine of Storms next, feeling confident in his abilities and weapons and ready for the next challenge. He found, instead, a fellow cleric stuck in a makeshift holding cell being protected by a phantom of a warrior. The phantom looked formidable, but it was no match for the cleric's holy shield and mace. The fellow cleric was free, and as a result was willing to teach the cleric more of the divine magic this land had to offer. His arsenal of spells growing, he decided to move on to the Tower of Latria again, as he had a promise to keep to free one more prisoner, and the key to the cell was around there somewhere. As the cleric pressed forward, he discovered a large pulsing heart in the center of this land, and stared at it as he planned its demise. He would need to bring this monstrosity down, and he knew where to start. By destroying the demonic magic that held the chains in place that kept the disgusting ball floating, he would bring it down and destroy it. With that done, he was ready to take on the rest of the horrors this land had. Another foggy portal, another demon controlling the land. But this time, it was twin demons that tried their luck against the cleric, but they were not fast enough to surround him. They fought hard to stop this messenger of the goddess, but their attacks were shrugged off and their magic deflected. All they could do in the end was watch in despair as the cleric made short work of them. The cleric climbed the final tower to where their demon guarding this world waited for him. It summoned a fierce warrior from another land and controlled it through the yellow turban it placed on its head. The cleric prepared for a brutal fight by casting his protective magic and entering the arena. The demon attacked, but the cleric stepped to the side and delivered a crushing blow, halfway killing the fiend. A few swings of the holy mace later and it was over. The goddess truly smiled on the cleric as his foes were falling one by one to his magic and holy mace. 3 archdemons had been slain, and only 2 were remaining. The archdemons would have to wait, though, as the cleric had promises to keep. He retrieved the key to the final holding cell in the jail and released the last prisoner in this land. The man would not live much longer, but he would die free and at peace. The cleric returned to the Shrine of Storms, ready to hunt the archdemon of the land. The demon threw reapers, spirits, and skeletons in front of the cleric, but one by one they fell. No undead abomination would be allowed to exist which mocked the once proud warriors and fighters they were in life. The cleric would grant them an end to their suffering. As he fought on, the archdemon had one more attempt to stop the cleric, and he would try to do so with a revived hero from a forgotten age. The cleric stopped and watched this hero as he moved around and realized he was blind. There was no great fight to be had here, just desperate attempts to block his path from a terrified, unholy beast. The cleric felt nothing but sorrow for this old hero, but knew he could not let him live. A few minutes later and the deed was done, but the cleric felt no joy in this mercy he granted. The archdemon of this world would pay for the undead it had created, and for the mockery of life it had brought forth. The cleric discovered a magic sword left on the ground and quickly slew the flying demon with it. No fanfare, no celebration, just justice for the fallen who had been brought back through necromancy. And the cleric continued on. He approached Boletaria once more and found his way was no longer blocked as he had collected the souls of 4 archdemons and was ready to finish his journey in this world. He was confronted by the officials of the castle, which he quickly defeated and found 2 items of note. First, a set of keys that unlocked the underpassage of the portcullis. The second, the official's hat, which he could not explain why, but would come in handy when rescuing another survivor. He returned to the locked door and used the keys to open it. Another official waited for him and dropped another key after their battle. The cleric had an idea what door this would go to, so he grabbed it and let the last prisoner out of his cell. It was another knight that was trapped, and the cleric freed him from his confinement. Content the knight would be safe, he made his way to the next locked door he had encountered before. At the end of the passage beyond the door was a loft, with an official controlling the staircase from above. In order to deceive the official, he donned the hat he found earlier that marked him as being allowed to come and go from this area. The disguise having worked, the cleric took out the sentry and sought to help the prisoner being held in this building. Having rescued all the prisoners of this world, the cleric was prepared to confront the demon who was controlling all of this from atop the Boletarian palace. He approached the fog once more, cast his divine magic, and prepared for battle. 2 curious things happened at once, however. The enemy approaching from the other side was not the archdemon of Boletaria, but rather his final knight. Before the cleric could confront this knight, though, a battle cry erupted from his right, and the knight he freed from the prison cell not too long ago rushed into battle. With the archdemon's champion distracted, the cleric and the knight were able to easily overwhelm this defender. It was almost time to finish the journey, but the goddess reminded the cleric there was still one more person to help and one more divine magic to learn. In order to learn the divine magic, the cleric would need to collect 3 colorless demon souls and present them to his fellow cleric in the Nexus. Having already collected 2 earlier by trading a sentient crow some lustrous items, he just needed 1 more. He had heard a rumor of a primeval demon around the entrance to the Stonefang tunnels, and he went to investigate. Sure enough, there the beast was. 1 swing of his divine mace later, and the soul was his. Having learned all the divine magic this world was left to offer, he had accomplished one of his goals. Now, to help the final person, and he was once again pulled into the toxic swamps. Here, he met a lone woman, sitting by herself in the muck and mire. She was searching for her brother in this horrid place, but did not yet know of his fate, and that he had fallen to the purifying magic of the cleric's mace. The cleric returned to the scene of the battle between the paladin and himself to see if there was any other memento he could find to present to the sister, but he was met with a cruel sight. The paladin had been brought back as a deeply corrupted version of his former self. The cleric once again felled the mighty warrior with a heavy heart after an intense battle. The shade was no match for the conduit of a goddess. The cleric returned to the sister with the family crest he had discovered and broke the news to her that her beloved brother had fallen. Another soul lost to this world and the demons that had taken over. It was time to end this journey and reclaim this land for the people who had long been suffering under these oppressors. The cleric fought his way to the top of the Boltarian palace and prepared his divine magic and readied his shield and mace and entered the final foggy portal to confront the king of the realm. King Allant had been waiting for him, watching his progress the entire time he had been in this land. Every trick the king tried was countered. Every attack that the demon landed was healed by divine power, and eventually the king could stand no more. The cleric was victorious, having bested the king of the demons, but something wasn't right. He could still feel the corruption of the world, so he journeyed back to the Nexus where the maiden was waiting for him. There was one last task to do. He was to eliminate the true king who had long ago been corrupted by the demons. The true king could do nothing but offer words. Words the cleric would not hear. He could not be corrupted or swayed by the fiend, for he was a servant of the goddess, and his devotion was absolute. With a few swings of his divine mace, the demon fell, and the cleric left the maiden to return the beast to its slumber. The goddess was pleased, and this land was safe for now. The cleric, having completed all of his objectives in Boletaria, was ready for his travels to end. Surely the goddess would reward his hard work and devotion, and she would. But before that, there was another task that needed to be accomplished.